Hey guys, Ben here with Oddly Armed, and today we're going to be jumping back into the Wayback Machine to check out another Cold War era rifle, that being a Czech VZ58. Now mine here is made by Czech Small Arms in the Czech Republic, so it is an imported rifle, not one of the Century Arms ones, but let's go ahead, talk about the history of the VZ58 and see how I have mine set up. Real quick, I want to give a big thank you to the Echo Valley Training Center in Capon Hill, West Virginia. I was just out there last weekend shooting the Moons Out, Goons Out 2025 match and also shooting some machine guns, which was absolutely fantastic. But big thank you to them. Done a lot of shooting there over the years, so if you're in the Virginia area, check them out. And real quick, one thing I want to talk about the VZ58 is a lot of people see this rifle and think of it as an AK variant. So it looks a lot like the AK. It is a 7.62x39 rifle. Uses similar magazine profile, but not a single part will interchange between the VZ58 and an AK-47, AKM, any AK pattern, because the operating system, the gas system, is completely different. This utilizes a short stroke gas piston system. And then the way that the bolt locks is completely different as well. This mechanically has more in common with a Walther P38 or a Beretta M9 than it does with an AK. So it is a fairly different rifle, but a lot of times people see them and they're like, oh, that's a really cool AK. Not an AK at all, it's a VZ58. But I digress on that. That is one point that comes up a lot with these rifles. Now, when it comes to the VZ58, it actually stands out when compared to some other communist bloc Warsaw Pact rifles, because most countries in the Warsaw Pact adopted some sort of an AK variant. Now, again, the Czechs stood out from that because they adopted a rifle that they designed themselves. So this was originally designed starting around 1956 and then obviously adopted in 1958, hence VZ58. And the Czechs were allowed to create this rifle because they had a history of firearms development. They had a long history of it. One of the main ones that people talk about is going to be the ZB-26, which was one of, if not the best light machine gun in World War II, and went on to be modified into the British Bren light machine gun. So they had a lot of experience and a lot of internal know-how, as well as the factories in place to be able to produce their own firearms. Now, the VZ58 was designed to replace what was originally the VZ52. So that was kind of the Czech kind of analog to the SKS rifle. And it was originally chambered in 7.62x45mm, which is slightly more powerful than 7.62x39. And that was the original VZ52. However, around 1957, they modified the VZ52 to 7.62x39, creating the VZ52/57, and that was the rifle that this would go on to replace. So much like the Russians, when they finally started getting the AK-47, the AKM in, they realized that the SKS was kind of redundant. That was meant to be their primary infantry rifle. However, the AK did all of the same things, and most of them better than the SKS. So they ended up replacing everything with the AK, and a similar situation happened with the VZ58. So they replaced all the VZ52 and the VZ52/57s with the VZ58. Now, there were a couple of different variants of the VZ58 that the Czechoslovak military adopted. So the main variant is going to be the VZ58P, and that's a little different than the one I have here because it has a full fixed buttstock. Now, you can see the material on the furniture here. This is a wood impregnated polymer. It's actually a really tough material and a good thing to make handguards out of. So essentially, it's a plastic with wood chips impregnated in it. So it's really good material, but it looks really cool, lovingly known as beaver barf because obviously beavers eat wood, barf it out, and it looks like this crap. So the P is the full stock version of this, and then this particular one with this kind of really annoying to use folding stock is the V version. So this stock will fold to the side and is primarily meant for your vehicle crewmen or your paratroopers, people who need to have a more compact rifle. Now there's a final version called the PI, and that was actually meant to be equipped with a night vision optic. So that's going to be a Gen 0, very early, very not good night vision optic. Now the VZ58 was produced till 1984, and about 1 million of these rifles were made, just under, so ton of production for these guys. Now, in the 1990s, of course, you had the dissolution of the Soviet Union. So you had Czechoslovakia break up into the Czech Republic, which is now Czechia, as well as Slovakia. And both the Czech Republic and Slovakia continued to use the VZ58 for quite a while. The Czech Republic used it all the way up until 2011 when it was replaced by the 805 Bren, which was superseded by the Bren 2, which I have videos on both of those rifles if you want to check those out. And then this was in Slovakian use until around 2014-2015 when it was finally replaced. Now, as a Warsaw Pact rifle, these actually got donated quite a bit to some of the smaller countries in the Warsaw Pact. So think like Cuba, Vietnam, countries like that. So these got use in South America, in Asia, a couple of different places around the world, and they tended to have a pretty good reputation for being reliable rifles. So some of the things that can stop it is going to be mud. So if I go ahead and pull back the bolt here, you can see we have the widest open receiver you're going to see on pretty much any rifle. So dirt can really ingress into this receiver. However, it's still a very reliable rifle that had a good track record. When it comes to the VZ58 in the US, there's been a couple of different companies making them or importing them over the years. So a big one you're going to see is going to be Century Arms in the VZ 2008. So that was a parts kit that Century Arms built back into a full functional rifle. A lot of times that's a bit of a red flag. Century Arms has a reputation for screwing up the guns that they build. Their imports are usually okay. But with the VZ 2008, for the most part, they were good rifles and they actually worked as advertised. The best ones to get your hands on, though, as far as VZ58 goes, are actual Czech imports. So originally, D-Technic brought these in, and then that kind of changed into CSA, Czech Small Arms, or Czechpoint. And that's what this rifle is. So this was an original Czech-made rifle. These use actually quite a bit of surplus furniture, mostly. So like the beaver barf handguards and pistol grips haven't been made since the Czechoslovakia was a thing. Some of the other parts, though, are going to be new made, like the receivers, the barrels as well, for the most part, for the newer ones. But they are very good, high-quality rifles that tend to hold up really well. And that's really all we have to go over for the history of the VZ58. So let's go ahead and get a close-in look and see how I have mine set up. All right, so starting from the front here, you can see I do have a muzzle brake on this rifle. This actually utilizes a 14x1 right-hand thread pitch, so it's a little bit different than the AK, which uses a 14x1 left hand. So that's something to keep in mind if you are going to try and suppress this rifle. This is your front sight block, and on the bottom of it, that's actually going to be the bayonet lug, which I'm going to demonstrate later on, but it works a little bit differently than most bayonet lugs you're going to see. Moving back the handguard, you can see our gas block here. It is not adjustable, so you only have one gas setting. And then our rear sight here is AK style tangent sight. It works pretty well, but it has all the same downsides that a standard tangent sight has. Then you can see our charging handle, which is sticking out the side of the bolt carrier group, and it is fixed and reciprocating on the right side from the factory. And our VZ58 magazine, which is proprietary. This does not utilize AK style magazines at all. And behind it, you can see that we do have the magazine release on the other side, and that little button there is actually the manual bolt hold open, so you can lock back the bolt with that. See our stamped dust cover here, as well as our safety selector, which is very awkwardly placed there on the right side, and our trigger. And then moving back from there, we just have that paratrooper style stock. And that's all there is to see on the right side. All right, we're not gonna have a whole lot of different stuff to see here on the left side. You see our muzzle brake again, and it does have a pin there like an AK to hold that muzzle brake in that spot there. And then we do have our front sight again, as well as our bayonet lug. And moving back, you can see our front sling swivel, which is just going to be a ring inside of a little hole there on the gas block. Kind of interesting, very utilitarian there. And then we do have that beaver barf handguard, so you can kind of see the wood impregnated polymer there, all the wood chips inside of that polymer. And moving back, we have our rear sight again, as well as our receiver. This does utilize a milled steel receiver, which is actually a lot lighter than it is on an AK-47. But it is a very nice milled receiver on this. And this does have a side rail. I don't actually have a mount for it though. And then moving back here, we can just see our stock once again. Let's go ahead and kick off the ratings with accuracy, where the VZ58 is going to get a score of 3. At 100 yards, using 124 grain North Macedonian 7.62 by 39 ammunition, I was able to get about a 2.9 MOA group using the VZ58, which is not bad considering 7.62 by 39 is not a very accurate cartridge, and that was with iron sights. So actually fairly happy with the accuracy on this rifle. Next up, we have Aftermarket, where I'm actually going to give this a 3. And that's because there's actually a fair amount of aftermarket support for the VZ58, more than you would expect for a Cold War era rifle. Now, a couple of different companies are making parts, the main ones being VZ58 USA, as well as Israeli Fab Defense making parts for this rifle. Some of the different things that you can change out here are handguards. So Fab Defense and VZ58 USA both make different styles of handguard for this rifle. So yeah, Picatinny or M-LOK options there for that. Another option from VZ58 USA is actually a replacement piston for this, which is meant to work with a suppressor a little bit easier. Since this doesn't have an adjustable gas block, they're going to be difficult to suppress. So that is an option there. New bolt release for this is going to be a huge ergonomic improvement, and that comes from VZ58 USA, as well as different options for bolt carriers. So you can see on the stock one, your charging handle is on the right side and is reciprocating. They do make one that swaps that charging handle over to the left side, and then they also make ones with a sturdier, bigger charging handle for it. They also make different safeties, ambidextrous one, which is, again, a huge ergonomic improvement for this rifle, as well as different mag releases to make it a little bit more accommodating because it is small and hard to hit on this rifle at times. Another big thing are going to be optics mounts for this from the factory. These weren't really meant to have optics on it, but there's a couple of different ways you can mount them. Again, mine has a side rail on it, so you can use an AK style side rail mount. It does have a different mounting interface, so you'll have to get the VZ58 specific one, but works essentially the same way. There's also dust cover mounts, which seem to be pretty good and actually hold zero, and that's an option that you can get for this rifle. Another thing you can get are pistol grips. So VZ58 USA and Fab Defense both make pistol grips for this rifle, so if you want to swap that out to something more ergonomic. And then also different stock options. So of course you have this wire folding stock, you have the original fixed wood impregnated stock, the beaver barf one. Fab Defense also makes a stock which is adjustable for this guy, as well as VZ58 USA actually makes a buffer tube adapter, both folding and fixed for this rifle, so you can swap it to whatever AR-15 style stock that you want for this rifle. You can't really change out trigger groups on this, so it utilizes a very interesting kind of linear hammer or striker fired system for the way the trigger works, so you're not really going to be able to swap that out to anything else. But that pretty much covers most of it. There's a couple of different types of magazine for this. You have the original aluminum one, like I've been using. Czechpoint also makes a polymer magazine, which seems okay, but I really prefer the original aluminum one. And then both Fab Defense and AC Unity make magazines as well out of polymer. Fab Defense one I would give a shot. AC Unity tends to be pretty bad and low quality, so I wouldn't necessarily get one of those. Next up, we have durability, where I'm going to give the VZ58 a full 5. The materials on this are absolutely fantastic. So the receiver on the VZ58 is going to be milled steel, so kind of like an AK-47 receiver. So it is pretty bomb-proof, and I don't see people generally having issues with that. That wood impregnated polymer for the handguard and the pistol grip, as well as the stock on some models, is very good, and it seems to hold up very well over time. Everything else is high quality steel. There's not a whole lot that can go wrong on this rifle. The one place where there might be an issue is going to be on the locking block. So again, this works kind of like a Walther P38, so you do have a locking block, but I don't hear a lot of people having issues with those breaking either, so it is a very durable rifle. And next up, we have ergonomics, where the VZ58 is going to get a score of 2. So checking it out, there isn't a whole lot of controls on this rifle. There is not an adjustable gas system. Your rear sight is going to be standard, typical AK, so it just uses the slider there. Nothing particularly special. And then the front sight is adjusted essentially the same way as it is on an AK. So you have the drum there that'll move side to side. as well as the front sight post, which moves up and down to adjust your zero on it. Now, as far as the charging handle goes, it is a fixed reciprocating charging handle on the right side there. So if I go ahead and grab that and pull it back, it'll lock our bolt open. That is one of the big ergonomic improvements over the AK, is it does have a standard bolt hold open on it, and it does stay locked open. So our magazine release is going to be this paddle right here. You can see it's kind of an FAL style, and that's just half of the trigger guard there. It is kind of difficult and awkward to use. However, it's not my favorite one just because it is kind of offset to the side there. It uses a typical rock and lock style magazine. These are proprietary magazines though that do have the bolt hold open for that follower to lock open there. To release a bolt, there is no bolt release, no manual one on the stock rifle. So you have to go ahead and pull back on the charging handle and let it go forward that way. You can manually lock open your bolt utilizing this button right here. So if you look at that, if you press up on that while pulling back on the charging handle, it'll lock your bolt hold open. So again, we'll go ahead and release that and throw our magazine back in the rifle here. And the next control we'll look at is the safety. And this is one of my least favorite parts here. It's on the right side. So you kind of actuate it with your trigger finger. It's just in a very awkward spot, and especially with the safety on, it really digs into your knuckle there, but kind of more annoying than anything else. But it still works, maybe a little bit better than the AK dust cover style one. And really nothing left to see here on the left side of the rifle. The last thing I have is going to be the folding stock here. So this is particularly tight on my rifle here, but that go ahead and folds over to the right side there, utilizing this little button at the bottom here, and it makes it a very nice compact package. To flip it back out, you have to press that button in once again, at which point your stock will flip back out. And that's really all we have to go over for the ergonomics on the VZ58. And next up we have maintenance, where I'm going to give the VZ58 a perfect 5. So as far as disassembly goes, it's incredibly easy on the VZ58. Just takes less than a minute. Super quick and easy to take everything apart on this rifle, to get inside of it. And once you take the bolt carrier group out and the dust cover off, it is incredibly open in that lower receiver, so you can get in and clean off everything incredibly easy. You have really, really open access to the back of the barrel. The gas system comes out really easily, so cleaning the piston off is not a problem. Very easy to do. Now, as far as OEM replacement parts on this, there are a ton of VZ58 parts kits on the US market right now. So those pretty much have everything you're going to need to replace certain parts on this rifle. So like your locking block, your bolt carrier, stuff like that. They're going to be in the parts kit, so you can replace basically everything with that. Main things you're not going to have are going to be your barrel and your receiver, but again, those are not things that you're really going to be replacing on the fly, so I wouldn't be too worried about that. And next up, we're going to have modularity, where I'm going to give the VZ58 a 3. And that's because it's actually fairly modular for a Cold War era rifle. So again, you can swap out the stocks pretty easily. They're held on with a single screw here in the back, a massive screw, but it is a single screw. It is kind of dated as far as the optics interface go, because again, you have to use either a side rail or a replacement dust cover to mount some sort of an optic to this. I'm not sure, but they may also make a rear sight mount, kind of like they do on the AK for optics. But then you can also replace the handguard and the pistol grip on these, so it is fairly modular, and you can add different parts to it. The barrel, you're not going to be swapping out at all, so this is pretty much permanently mounted into the receiver, so you're kind of stuck with the caliber that you have. However, they do have 5.56 caliber models of the VZ58, and they're also, or at least they just announced the 300 blackout version of the VZ58, so they're still coming out with new models of it. And really quickly, I did want to talk about the magazine on the VZ58 because, like I said before, it is proprietary and not interchangeable with an AK style magazine like this here, Bakelite mag. So comparing the two, you can see at the front here, it does have a little bit of a different profile for that front lug, which locks into the receiver. And then it does also have a left side lug here in the back to lock underneath that magazine release, which is a little bit different than the center one on the AK magazine. Looking at it at the top, you can see it's fairly similar, but again, this does have a bolt hold open, so it does have that built into the follower, which AK magazines don't have. Now it is going to be about the same curvature because these both use 7.62 by 39, so that seems pretty obvious there. However, these are incredibly lightweight compared to even the Bakelite magazines for the AK, because this is an aluminum magazine. And it's actually quite durable considering it's a lightweight aluminum magazine, and I haven't seen too many issues with these breaking. So these are a fantastic magazine. However, they are proprietary. They do make, or at least AC Unity makes a magazine, which I would not recommend because it is AC Unity. And then Fab Defense also makes an aftermarket magazine for these. As well as Czechpoint also makes a polymer magazine, but I don't have a ton of experience with those. Now, one thing I want to demonstrate for you guys is being a Cold War era rifle, it actually has the facilities to be loaded with a stripper clip. So you can see there, we actually have the rails in there to fit a stripper clip. This is just a standard SKS style stripper clip. These originally came with 5-round ones that were proprietary, but it does work with the SKS ones. So there is a bit of a trick to it. You do slot it in there like that, but you can't just press down on it like you would a typical stripper clip, or even lift that top cartridge there and pull back like you would normally do. With this, the trick is you actually have to press forward on the stripper clip. So the best way to do it is with your offhand, grip in front of the magazine and put your thumb behind the stripper clip while putting forward pressure on it, at which point you can go ahead and grab that top cartridge. And it is still fairly tough on these, but you can strip down into the magazine then and get all 10 cartridges into the magazine. So that's pretty much how you use the stripper clip on a VZ58. And real quick, I also want to show you guys the bayonet for one of these VZ58s. So you can see it uses a beaver bark style kind of tang here at the back, so it is pretty well matched to the rifle. And this is more of a utility knife style of bayonet. However, it is a bit different because it mounts onto your gas block here. This is going to be our bayonet lug, but instead of coming on the front here like it does on most rifles, it's actually going to mount from the rear. So you can see it kind of slides over there. It's a little bit tight on this rifle, but it's going to go ahead and wiggle in place and lock there. So that's the bayonet here. These are very inexpensive if you want to get your hands on one, so I would absolutely recommend getting one. And next up we have price, where I'm going to give the CSA VZ58 a 3. So generally you're going to see these going for a little bit over $1,500, so $1,500, $1,600 range. You can find them cheaper every once in a while, but that's typically what they're going to go for. And next up we have shooting characteristics, where I'm going to give the VZ58 a 3. As far as the trigger goes, it's actually really nice on this rifle, and it weighs in very lightweight at about 4 pounds. Now that trigger is actually kind of unique compared to other combat rifles, because instead of using a pivoting style of hammer like you see in an AR-15, this actually uses a linear hammer. So it's essentially like a striker fired rifle. So you have your trigger, which just releases the striker, which shoots into the back in a straight line of the firing pin. So very interesting system that's different than what you typically see. Now, as far as the recoil impulse, again, this is 7.62 by 39, which is going to be a heavier recoiling cartridge, but this rifle is also very lightweight, and you feel it. So this rifle does have quite a bit of thump to it. So it's not the easiest rifle to shoot quick, even with a muzzle brake on there, and this paratrooper style stock does not help with that much. As far as suppressor usage goes, you can put a can on this, so they do make flash hiders which are chemo compatible for this, as well as some other styles. Again, this uses a metric 14x1 right hand, so that's the exact opposite of the 14x1 left hand that you typically see on AK pattern rifles. I will say you cannot adjust the gas system without buying a replacement piston, so it is very likely going to be overgassed with a suppressor on it. So I would absolutely recommend, if you're going to go that route, you have a low back pressure can to use on it. Otherwise, this thing is going to be probably pretty violent. And next up, we have reliability, where I'm going to give the VZ58 a 4. Now, personally, I haven't had any issues with my VZ58. However, I haven't used it in a lot of inclement conditions. So given how open the top of the receiver is, there is a lot of room for stuff to get in there. So some of the things I've seen with like mud testing with these is they tend to stop up pretty quickly because it exposes not only the inside of the receiver, but like the locking area where that locking block actually has to drop into. So this thing would be pretty easy to get stopped up as soon as you get it into the mud. But other than that, it is a pretty solid rifle that doesn't have issues as long as you keep it clean. Now, weight is really where the VZ58 excels, and it comes in at 6.4 pounds, which gives it a score of 4. Which is actually pretty incredible considering AK-47 is with a milled receiver is going to come in like right around 9 pounds. It is an incredibly heavy rifle when you compare it to this, and this is even lighter than a stamp steel AKM. So the VZ58 is incredibly spelt for what you're really expecting to get with a 7.62x39 milled receiver rifle. And when we go ahead and add up all 10 categories, we come up with a score of 36 for the VZ58, which puts it in the A tier. That's a pretty solid score, particularly for a Cold War era rifle that's quite old at this point. So I'm very happy with the VZ58. So the weight is a really good point on it. Some other stuff is the parts are very easy to replace. It is incredibly easy to clean the inside of the receiver, and for what it is, it's actually fairly accurate. So overall, this is a very, very good rifle to own. And finally, we're going to talk about where I think the VZ58 ranks as far as coolness goes. So I'm going to put it in the B tier, and that's because you really don't see them a whole lot in pop culture, and when you do, it's typically as more of a stand-in for an AK than anything else. So one of the prime examples being some of the classic James Bond movies, you can actually see VZ58s in them every once in a while, and I think that was more to evoke the AK-47 than anything else, because these are probably a little bit easier to get than an AK at the time. The one place in movies that this has popped up recently is actually the newest James Bond movie, No Time to Die. The main villain actually utilized one of the shortened versions of the VZ58, so that's pretty cool, but that's really about it. You don't see these a whole lot, particularly in modern movies. Same thing with video games. These are very seldom seen in video games. They don't pop up all that often. None of the Call of Duties, none of the Battlefield games. So they don't have a huge pop culture presence. And guys, I'll wrap us up for my review on the CSA VZ58. So thank you guys for coming in and checking it out today. I'll have more stuff coming out here in the future, so please stay tuned for that. Like, share, subscribe, and do all that fun stuff, and I will catch you guys later.